to take the North and never give it back.
So that's a good pick. You get the corner. I got to go bold, right? I got to go bold for this.
Yeah, she's got some nice.
Welcome back to the Unbearable Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Barron. Make sure to like and subscribe if you're out there on YouTube. And also, if you're out there in podcast land, make sure to download, make sure to rate 5 stars, do all that good stuff. So today, we are breaking down the data deep dive and also kind of like what we did last week, add in a little bit about what we saw on tape because we were going through 3 hours of tape on Monday. So if you haven't already, make sure to follow out there because then you can see the live film walkthrough. It's free and you get to see all the film. And we just comment on it and just talk about what we all see out there. So super fun show that we do on Mondays. But hey, let's get right into it and talk a little bit about, as we always do, the worst grades and talk about what we saw on tape just to see, did what we see match up with the PFF grades? And then we break down the stats, the advanced analytics on everything down below. So Caleb, the running, the receiving, the O-line, D-line, and everything else. So let's flip through and talk a little bit about the top graded players and the worst graded players, starting with the offense, where overall we liked how the offense played because the offense was good. And the PFF grades also reflect that as well. Also, just so everyone knows out there, PFF grades are definitely not the end-all be-all. I just like using it because they do grade every single play, and it's nice to at least see it out there, and we'll say when we disagree with some of those grades. So your top 3 graded players, all offensive linemen. You have 2 in the 80s, which are Tevin Jenkins and Bill Murray. And right off the bat, you have an 84.5 for Tevin and an 83.9 for Bill Murray. And the tape kind of backs this up. Tevin Jenkins, I don't know if he was that great. Like, it didn't seem like he was completely popping off, but Bill Murray was. When we were watching the tape, there was really only like one running snap that he should have been in a different spot, but he wasn't. But overall, I mean, the guy was good. The guy was really good. And it's something when you are going against, it's bad competition. So I know there's that. But Bill wasn't really being moved all that much. He looked really, really good. And honestly, I want to see him out there again just to see more because we saw him really good in the preseason. He's someone who is a former defensive lineman, so has some room for growth. But also some other people out there. We have Braxton Jones with a 73.5, Cole Kmet with a 73.1, Coleman Shelton 72.2. And just to kind of break down those 3, Braxton's, like we said, Braxton's passing grade, which is an 83.4, is always going to be slightly inflated. Why? Because it's yet again, whether someone who's listening to this likes this or not, he's not letting the guy past him. So technically he gets, in my opinion, he probably will get a good grade in the PFF grading system because he's not letting the person actually beat him, but he's just letting the person push him back 5 yards, like we've said. So that's why I think you see the passing grade a little bit higher, and especially since he is actually going one-on-one in a lot of these situations. His run block grade, 64.6. Cole Kmet looked good. There was some run blocking that I didn't necessarily love out there, so I don't fully agree with the 73.4 grade for him. But then Coleman Shelton, I think a lot of people would have their heads turned like, Coleman Shelton? Coleman Shelton had a good game. Like, yeah, when we watched, Coleman played well. And then Darnell Wright is down at 71.1. Darnell played well as well. And then Caleb Williams at a 72 grade and DJ Moore at a 69.6 grade. Agreed. Like, they look great. They looked really good. So really nothing crazy. I don't know if Tevin deserves to be the highest graded player out there. And also Braxton, I don't think deserves to be the 3rd highest graded. But overall, I mean, the offense did play well all around. And when we look at the worst graded players, we have only 3, which is Doug Kramer at a whopping 44.3, not great. And then Keenan Allen at 56 and Gerald Everett at 59. And looking at this, the thing I'll say is I agree with Doug Kramer. Doug Kramer, only played 9 snaps, but for those snaps that he was out there, he didn't have great blocks. And also he committed a penalty. So I totally agree with that grade. And then Keenan Allen, Gerald Everett, yeah, both didn't necessarily pop. Keenan had one kind of good little route. So Yeah, and I mean, when you think about 60 kind of being that average from the PFF grading system, below average, those two players, yeah, I agree with those. I agree with that overall. But let's talk about the defense a little bit more as well. So the defense, and actually, let's go into Caleb Williams. Let's call an audible. Let's go straight into the offense, and then on the defense, we'll hit you with the worst and the top grades for that as well. So let's actually hit up number 18 because we got to talk about this. But first, we always got to break down our overall rankings, where we are at. And for PFF grades, we soared up to number 16 overall, 25 offense, second best, highest graded defense, jumping up 8 spots, and special teams going up 11 spots. Keep in mind, too, these aren't some power rankings that someone put together. These are just, the PFF grades is literally just who has the highest graded team just by consensus grades, essentially. And then DVOA, we are the 20th team, moving up 3 spots, 26 offense, 7th defense, moving up 5 spots, and 7th special teams. And then ESPN's efficiency numbers, 13th. So top half, let's go. Moving up 5 spots. Offense is 23rd, defense is 3rd, and special teams is 18th. And the ESPN's football power index, we're 17th. So a lot of this, what you're seeing out there is, like, on average, we're kind of this middle of the road team where if the offense is playing well, then then we are going to be that, and we'll probably get a little bit better and better and better. So I like how these grades, how this system is kind of moving us up a little bit. And the offense is the big reason. So on the offense, just from the rankings, 25, 26, 23, and 25 from FPI. So you're talking about like 25th best offense, which is fair, and we're getting better. And then the defense, 2, 7, 3, and 2. So I actually think that's a little bit too high on this defense. I don't think we're a top 5 defense. I think that number 7, like what DVOA has, I kind of like that. Like, I think that's a good, as long as we're top 10, that's what I think that the goal is. And yeah, if we can reach top 5, unbelievable. I'll be happy. But I don't think that we're fully there yet. But overall, it's nice to see some more green for the Bears as we're getting better and better and better. But speaking of getting better, we have our Caleb Williams. And Caleb Williams also was number 1 in QBR this week at 83.8. So for things you love to see. But also, he was top 10 in EPA, passing EPA, and rush EPA this week. And yet again, awesome things that you want to see out there. And then when you look overall, we talked about this post game that he had 2.94 seconds to throw, which yet again, he's holding onto the ball slightly longer than he was at those first 3 weeks, which is kind of what you want to see. It's not just those simple passes. And yeah, there's a good handful of those sprinkled out there, but you look at his air yards completed compared to his average intended air yards, 6.1 to 7.6, his closest disparity out there. Also, negative 2.2% completion over expected, which, it's nothing crazy. It's just kind of like it's slightly negative. So, no concern, nothing crazy there, just a stat that's out there. But now, if we look at where he was thrown, like we mentioned, he had 2 completions. He was 2 of 3 for the over 20 yards, which is great because he really hasn't been that great on those deep ball passes. But then also when you're looking at his other metrics, and just for those out on YouTube land, it looks a little small, so I'll actually just expand this a little bit. So 34%, he was blitzed 34% of the time, and also under pressure, according to PFF, 17% of the time. So really was able to be kept clean, which you love to see. Also had 2 turnover-worthy plays when he was actually kept clean. So yeah, there was a couple plays a little close, but ultimately things were good. But also something that's impressive, when he was blitzed, an 81.8 PFF grade, which is absolutely great, especially when you're talking about a rookie quarterback. And what we saw on tape, there's a couple plays that he could have cleaned up when he was blitzed, like one in particular where he just kind of lobbed it deep instead, which it seems like that's where he was going to go from the jump. So I don't fault him completely, but it was something where maybe on the tape, if he was supposed to go through his reads or options, if he is, giant if there, because we don't know what the actual play call was, if he was supposed to do that, he should have looked down the barrel of the blitzer, right? Which is a very, very, very hard thing to do because someone was wide open. So that's something that might be a good learning opportunity, even if he wasn't even actually supposed to look at it. Just say, hey, look, this is what happens, right? They say if someone's blitzing on one side, chances are someone's open on that side as well. But overall, only 11% screens. So we're actually lowering those numbers of screens. So you like to see that because typically when someone is running a lot of screens in an offense, it does. I know that we said this about Luke Getsy. A lot of times it's actually because they just don't have faith in the quarterback to run a system. So they're saying you run screens. So less number of screens, probably good. But yet again, like what is going to be the normality of screens? I know that that Shane Waldron did run a lot of screens out in Seattle. So that is something that is probably here to stay. But something that I do hope is here to stay is what we saw out of Swift. And I've said this. I have been someone who has been critical of Swift because he deserved to be criticized how he was playing the first 3 weeks. It was not good. So with that, like if you're not playing well, me saying that you're not playing well actually isn't even criticism. It's just seeing what we see. I thought he had a very good game. And when we're watching the tape, like for those that watched it, I was like kind of laughing to myself. I'm like, he looks really good. And I really liked how he was going through the holes, how he's finding everything. I thought he did a very, very good job. Now, at the goal line, he's still someone who is a very light back. So I'm happy that he got his touchdown. But overall, it's like it's smart to just keep Roschon out there because Swift is a small guy. Like he really is a small guy. So ultimately, just feed it to Roschon down there. But he didn't have as great of numbers when you look at the next gen stats as he did last week. A 4.49 efficiency grade, which isn't awesome. You want to see it kind of in the 2s, the 3s, means highly efficient running. But I thought he did well. He faced 19% of eight defenders in the box. Also spent 2.74 seconds behind the line of scrimmage and had negative 0.58 rush yards over expected per attempt. Still isn't great, but I honestly thought, all things aside, thought he had a good game. And if he keeps churning out games like that, by all means. But I still said, during the stream, that's something that I do want to see out of Swift is I do want to see him just continue to do this against tougher and tougher competition. Because he's gone against two of the worst run defenses in back-to-back weeks. So because of this, let's see him continue to do it. You don't have to do it against the top run defense for me to be a believer, but just as we start to go through some normal run defenses, I want to just see how good he actually will be because he is known for kind of doing his own thing and not necessarily finding the proper hole. So let's go over to the receiving. And honestly, from the receiving side of things, there's not a lot of stuff for us to talk about besides just the average yards of separation, which they did very well. When Rome Odunze was targeted, he had 4.63 yards of separation. Keep in mind, averages around 3. Cole Kmet at 3.62. DJ Moore at 4.86 and Gerald Everett at 5.46. Keenan Allen, 2.66. So kind of echoes what the PFF grade had where, Keenan Allen wasn't necessarily fully open. But also with Gerald Everett, the reason why that's so juiced up is because he had a little short route. No one else was around him, juiced it up. So some of these separation numbers are definitely it's tight ends can be a little crazy. But wide receivers are good because then from the wide receivers, as long as you're getting a lot of different targets, then the numbers are more accurate. But also, too, another thing as well, with the running attack, we were 10th in EPA per rush at 0.02. And also, we faced the 6th highest rate of stacked boxes last week. So, good stuff to see. But let's switch over to this offensive line. Because this offensive line is something that we saw the best that we have with the offensive line. And I want to just kind of throw this out here. Let me just find the graphic. So I combined a bunch of stuff together where it's the average separation from the quarterback. This kind of echoes what we saw where Harris had the closest yards of separation with the quarterback because, yet again, going against Braxton Jones. Braxton Jones gives up those yards. So Harris had about 4.06 yards away from the quarterback. League average 4.57. So a little less than average. And honestly, then you see Robinson and Smith on the interior at 4.43. But really, Darnell Wright at 5.5. That is great. He really did keep people away from the quarterback overall. But also too, when you look at just the in general pass blocking snaps, Matt Pryor had the highest pass block grade at 87.5. And I agree. Matt Pryor looked really good. We haven't talked about him yet. This entire line looked good, but every time that you see Braxton get pushed back, you go, ugh. But everyone graded in the 80s except for Darnell Wright, which Darnell did get beat. There was a couple times that he did, in fact, get beat. He also, according to PFF, is the only person that let up a pressure, which I don't really agree with because they said that it was a sack, and that was Braxton Jones. So I don't know if, like we saw it was Braxton. It was not, or actually, was it? No. Now I'm all mixed up. But overall, Darnell, nothing crazy. It was a good game across the board from all the offensive linemen. But also, too, when you look at stuff rate, which is a how many times were people basically would have running back get stuffed at the line, the Bears were the 8th best, according to Next Gen Stats, at 10.3% stuff rate. So allowing the running back to do something on 90% of their carries. Also, Next Gen Stats, they said Caleb was under pressure 34% of the time. Big discrepancy between PFF and Next Gen Stats. I side with Next Gen Stats because it didn't feel like he was only pressured once, for sure. But then also time to pressure against from Next Gen Stats was 2.56, which is just about league average. So how much time does it take for him to actually get pressured was about 2.5 seconds. So overall, good stuff from the offense. Let's flip over to the defense, where I said we'll talk about the grades a little bit with this defense, where we had a lot of people that were above average. Jalen Jones getting the highest grade, 9 snaps, but had a pass breakup. So we'll just kind of skip that. But Kevin Byard at a 91.7, an elite grade. Tape backs it up. He was flying out there. He was, there's a couple snaps where he read the play and he just literally goes down, makes the play. Great stuff from Kevin Byard. Then you add in the interception. He looked good. Tremaine Edmonds, he did look good. They actually love his coverage grade at 87.6. But yeah, Edmonds looked good. There was every now and again, in some of the running snaps, he overcommits. So on the big touchdown run, he goes a little bit too far to the left side and ultimately gets snuffed, isn't able to make a play. They score a touchdown. And Brisker was also at fault with that as well. Actually, Brisker was probably more at fault than Edmonds when we were watching the tape on that play in particular. But you look at the other people grading in the 80s, Jalen Johnson at 83.7. Dude was locking down people. Like, he looks so good out there. And then Darrell Taylor, 81.7. Darrell Taylor continues to be great. Like, continues to look really, really good. Not just rushing the passer, but also in run defense, where PFF gave him an 80.2 grade. He looked good. And he blew up, I think, 2 plays. He created the run stop. Like, he looked really, really, really good. Then we have Amen, only 9 snaps, but the people that played a little bit more that are in the 70s, Javon Dexter, Andrew Billings, and DeMarcus Walker, all solid games. I thought that Billings definitely had a better game, but there was a couple snaps he was put on skates, nothing concerning, but Billings also made these big plays, getting past his guys. No one really did that as much as Billings did, except for even like a Darrell Taylor. And then TJ Edwards, I disagree with this grade. Like, when we were watching him out there, Edwards is really good. Like, we kept saying that. TJ Edwards is really fun to watch. And yeah, he has basically a 70 grade, which isn't bad, but I just thought that he was one of my favorite players to watch on tape. I just thought he played great. Kyler had a good game. And then Chris Williams actually surprised me. He didn't look that bad out there. I was expecting him to be the reason why the run game wasn't working, or the run defense wasn't working, but ultimately he looked good. And then also, if we flip over to the defensive grades, the worst, Jack Sanborn, they gave him a 29.9 coverage grade. That's, coverage is always hard for us to kind of see how good, what are they expecting. But yeah, I agree with their run defense grade at 73.7. Jack looked good out there, one defending the run, but only 5 snaps with him doing that. Then Blackwell and Hardy didn't play much, but Montez Sweat, Jaquan Brisker, and Tyreek Stevenson and Austin Booker all below average grades. And to be honest with you, the only one that I thought that Tyreek Stevenson played a little bit better in coverage than what he's getting credit for. And then also Brisker was out of position a couple times. I definitely agree. I see some of this. I think he was just more average. It's hard because when you see Brisker, he makes these big pops of plays. He clean clocked that one guy, but there's some times that he's just out of position. I don't agree with how low he was graded, but yeah, I think that he should have been a little bit higher. But yeah, if they're saying, if you technically read this as slightly below average, it's not as harsh as it may seem. But also Austin Booker didn't have a great game, so I don't mind that. But it's Montez Sweat that I wanted to call out because I know when we were watching the stream on Monday, something we brought up is well, is he getting doubled? And we're looking, and he's not really getting doubled. This goes back to what's wrong with Montez Sweat. I think it's something with his foot. He was banged up in the preseason. He just hasn't looked the same. We expected regression, but not to this level. Really wasn't getting as double teamed as I think a lot of us wish he was. He's just not making as big of an impact, but yet again, room for concern? No. No, if anything, it's probably just a little injury, and then hopefully after the bye week, getting some rest on it, hopefully we can just start to see him kind of get back to normal Montez Sweat. But let's talk a little bit about this defensive line, though, shall we? Because with this defensive line, even though that he had one of the worst grades, Montez Sweat was usually the closest from the quarterback. The numbers back it up at 3.83. So yet again, 4.5 is average, so better than average. And also Javon Dexter at 4 yards away looked good. Billings and Walker, not so much, getting close to that 5 yards away from the quarterback. But yet again, Billings, I felt had more of the pops. And same thing with, Walker had a couple of those, but Billings really did have more pop plays out there. So I don't really buy that, but I know that Billings was also getting doubled a couple times. So that might have brought his average overall down a little, or overall up technically a little bit more. But when we talk about overall win rates, according to ESPN Analytics, Bears from a pass rush win rate are still second, but from a run stop win rate, 25th. So slightly getting better now. But when you look at their offensive line, ESPN Analytics really likes the Bears. They have them as the 12th best pass block win rate at 61% and the 8th best run block win rate at 74%. This is also not just last week's. This is across the season. So good distinction there, right? A lot of the stats we talk about this week is more so just this current week at week 5. This is throughout the season. But also too, pass rush win rate overall for the season, we have Andrew Billings at a pass rush win rate of 18% with a double team percentage of 73%. And Javon Dexter win rate of 16% with a double team rate of 57%. But also, if we go over to the pass rush grades according to PFF, this week, the highest graded pass rusher, Andrew Billings at 73.8 and Darrell Taylor at 67.8. Best win percentages, Byron Coward at 23%, Andrew Billings at 15 and Darrell Taylor at 15, but also DeMarcus Walker and Javon Dexter getting in the 13s from a win percentage, but Montez Sweat at 4.5 and Chris Williams at 6.3 and Austin Booker not recording a pass rush win in 17 snaps, which I kind of agree. Austin Booker, it wasn't his best game for sure. It definitely wasn't. There's a couple that he was trying to do something, but I wouldn't consider them wins. So I do agree with this because Montez didn't really seem to be doing too much. Same thing with Booker and Williams. So overall, that's the defensive line. Only other thing that I'll add in as well is a little bit more stats on the defense. Darrell Taylor is still 6, actually, in defensive end win rate, according to ESPN, at 28% with a double team rate of 16%. But then also, we have the EPA per rush for this defense this week. For this week, their EPA per rush was plus 13, which was the 8th worst. But we had the best EPA per pass at negative 0.64. Yet again, defense, so it flips. Also, we stacked the box because this was something that I was curious about. We stacked the box a total of 15.8%. So we increased from 0 from last week, but overall, we just were not stacking the box that much. Also, 41.5% pressure rate according to Next Gen Stats, which was the 7th best in week 5. So now, also, I forgot to mention another thing. Braxton Jones is still 10th in run block win rate according to ESPN Analytics on the season, with an 80% pass run block win rate and a double team rate in the running game of only 25%, which honestly I thought was a little high because we don't see him getting too much help in the run game, honestly. But, I guess 1 in every 4, pretty good, because a lot of the interior players seem to get a lot of that help for sure. So let's flip over to coverage, where coverage, Jalen Johnson had a, what is it called? So this is a metric that it's called lockdown percentage that PFF charts. And basically what it means is the metric is focused on coverage, measuring how well a defender prevents a receiver from getting open. It's space. It excludes plays where the defender intentionally gives up space to protect the first down marker or limits yards after the catch. So good stuff to know here. But last week, Jalen Johnson had a lockdown percentage of 77.78, which backs up what we saw on tape, because the man did not give up many completions. Like, he did not give up much separation. He was a blanket over everybody that was over there. But on the year, Jalen Johnson has a lockdown percentage of 52.5, which is pretty darn good, just outside of like kind of top 10 overall amongst all defenders. And Kyler Gordon is 31%, and Tyreek Stevenson is down there at about 25% on the year, which kind of makes sense, because when you watch the tape, it's just Stevenson is the one that gives up a lot. It's like Stevenson gives up the most separation, and then it goes to Kyler, and then Jalen's freaking lockdown, just a blanket. But even though that Tyreek Stevenson only allowed 1 catch on 6 targets, PFF still gave him a grade of 55 because of just like what they're talking about. I think his lockdown percentage this week was all the way down at like 18%. So he was allowing some separation out there. I thought he was doing a little bit better than that. I thought that was a little bit harsh on him. But yeah, Tyreek Stevenson, though, he's all about breaking up plays, which he was doing on tape. But you look at some of the really high graded ones: Jalen Johnson, 84.9, Tremaine Edmonds, 87, and Kevin Byard, 90 coverage grades this week, and TJ Edwards at 75. Honestly, I just thought that everyone, like, yet again, everyone was covering very well. Brisker, some things like just looked a little bit off. Same thing, like Tyreek looked good every now and again. That's just Tyreek Stevenson, though. Like, that's just how he is. Like, every now and again, he'll make this big play, but then there's going to be other plays that are kind of given up. But with that, that's it for our data deep dive. So I hope you appreciate that. Make sure to like and subscribe if you're out there on YouTube. Also, download the podcast everywhere you get your podcast. Just search for Unbearable Sports. And with that, Unbearable Sports Podcast, we are out.
Yeah, she's got some nice long hair, and you know that she's a bad chick.